Marion Carter woke up at 4:50 a.m. in a damp basement apartment in the East River neighborhood, where even the sound of dripping water could keep someone awake. The pale yellow light from a filament bulb shone down on the peeling floor. She quietly poured coffee from an old drip machine, took a deep breath, and gently woke Ellie with a soft hug. "Are you leaving early today, Mommy?" the girl asked. Marion gave a tired smile. "I'll be back before you even notice I'm gone." While Ellie ate her oatmeal, Marion glanced at the unpaid electricity bill and a small note, "Meeting with Ellie's dad's divorce lawyer, 3 p.m. Friday." A brief flicker of pain crossed her eyes, but she quickly brushed it away. Everything else could wait. Today was a workday. She put on the faded uniform of Black Glove Company, carrying an old canvas bag filled with brushes, a floor squeegee, and a disinfectant spray bottle. On the crowded subway ride, she received an anonymous email. "Check auxiliary safe, east basement. No subject, no sender, no extra content." At the Rothmore Mansion, a 2,000 square meter neoclassical estate on a private hill outside Manhattan, Marion began her shift at 7 a.m. She had grown used to the quiet luxury of this place: marble floors, Italian glass chandeliers, and the cold stillness that seemed to seep from every closed door. Today's assignment had her cleaning the basement, a place no one wanted to go because of the darkness and spiderwebs. But Marion didn't complain. She needed a quiet place to think. Down in the east basement, she caught a faint burnt smell, like smoldering paper that hadn't gone out. Behind the wall of the electrical room, she found an auxiliary safe, recently installed, with taint still wet around its edges. The lock was oily, freshly wiped. She found a slip of paper wedged behind it, R1209, a passcode. After a few minutes of fumbling, the safe clicked open. Inside were half-burned documents, a dusty USB stick, and a small brown leather notebook with the initials JJ embossed on the cover. She immediately recognized Professor Jonas's handwriting. She tucked the USB and the notebook into her waistband, closed the safe, and left as if she had never been there. For the rest of the day, she couldn't stop thinking about the strange email, and why, out of all people, it had come to her. That night, Ellie was drawing on the floor. Her sketch showed a woman standing between two skyscrapers, one hand holding a mop, the other shielding a child from the sun. She looked up and asked, "Do good people always win?" Marion paused for several seconds. In her heart, the answer was still too vague. But today, for the first time in years, she felt she might be stepping into an answer bigger than life itself. Marion Carter woke up at 4:50 a.m. in a damp basement apartment in the East River district, where even the sound of dripping water was enough to keep someone awake. She brewed coffee using a rusty old drip machine and gently woke Ellie with a soft hug. "Are you leaving early today, Mommy?" Ellie asked. Marion simply smiled. "I'll be back before you even notice I'm gone." Marion put on her faded old uniform from the Black Glove Cleaning Service Company and stepped out into the gray morning fog. On the crowded subway ride, she received an anonymous email. "Check auxiliary safe, east basement. No subject, no sender." At the Rothmore Mansion, a 2,000 square meter neoclassical estate on the outskirts of the city, Marion started her shift at 7 a.m. She was often assigned to clean the basement because no one else wanted to go down there. A cold, lightless space filled with dusty old papers. When she reached the east basement area, Marion noticed a newly installed auxiliary safe near the generator room. The lock was still slightly damp, a sign that someone had recently used it. Behind it, she found a clipped note with the code, R1209. Inside the safe were half-burned documents, a dusty USB stick, and a notebook with handwritten initials, JJ, the handwriting of Professor Jonas. That evening, Ellie sat on the floor drawing pictures. She looked up and asked, "Do good people always win?" Marion fell silent. In her heart, the answer was still unclear. But today, for the first time in many years, she felt, maybe, she was ready to start looking for it. A damp apartment, a cold morning, a worn janitor's uniform. Marion began her day like any other, but today she received a strange message. "Check auxiliary safe, east basement. At Rothmore Mansion, Marion went to work as usual, but her heart was full of unease. When she reached the basement, she noticed a door with a special lock. The lock had fresh white marks. Everything began to unfold. This was no longer an ordinary cleaning job. That night, her little daughter Ellie asked if good people always win. Marion said nothing. In her heart, the answer was still too vague. The next morning, Marion woke up with a lingering sense of unease, as if someone was watching her every breath. While Ellie was still sound asleep, Marion quietly noted everything she had found the night before in her notebook. The safe's code, the contents of the files, and traces linked to Professor Jonas. She locked the notebook and hid it in the fabric-lined drawer under the bed, the spot where Ellie usually kept her old toys. On her way to work, Marion stopped by a small internet cafe near the train station. With slightly trembling hands, she created an anonymous email and sent copies of several files from the USB to herself, as well as to a newly created Gmail address, ellieguardian01@. She wrote clearly in the subject line, "Backup in case I disappear." At the Rothmore Mansion, Marion observed every hallway with new eyes. The security guards had rotated shifts today. The fingerprint scanner at the basement entrance had been replaced with a more advanced model. She felt the pressure tighten around her throat, but still silently played the role of the invisible worker. In a locked room in the basement, where antique items and old financial records were stored, she opened the USB using the laptop she had bought the day before. The files opened slowly, as if pulling each of her nerves taut with tension. Inside, detailed plans for funding a political campaign, fake investment contracts, and maps connecting offshore accounts in 5 different countries. A separate folder was labeled Phoenix. Inside were satellite images, forged military documents, and internal memos detailing manipulation of carbon credit values on the agent exchange market. One document clearly stated, "Redirect profits through Green Star Foundation," disguised as CSR. As she continued digging, Marion discovered a circular accounting scheme. Ethereum received investments, passed funds to Green Star, which then returned to Rothmore as Class C shares, entirely off the official audit records. Money in, money out, vanishing as if it never existed. While she was saving a few key pieces of evidence, Marion was startled by footsteps behind her. But it was only Henry, a logistics staff member, stopping by to pick up some documents. She quickly shut the laptop and pretended to clean the furniture. Henry smiled and asked, "Starting early, huh?" "Just had nothing better to do," she replied. That night, Marion drew the curtains tightly and checked the locks 3 times. She reopened Professor Jonas's old hard drive. Among the old videos, she found one file that had never been opened, a .enc file. After hours of trying passwords, she entered Jonas's date of death, 021219, and the file opened. It was a digital journal. Jonas had been tracking Rothmore for 7 years, since their early days as a small investment firm. He described how they had gradually bribed auditors, acquired failing companies to fabricate money cycles. Jonas had once submitted a report to the Ministry of Finance, but it had been rejected for lack of legal evidence. He wrote, "I used to believe the truth would speak for itself, but now I understand. Only the brave can give it a voice." Just as Marion shut the laptop, the ceiling light flickered 3 times and went out. Through the narrow window, she saw the figure of a man dressed in black standing silently in the dark alley across from her apartment. The next morning, Marion woke up with a persistent feeling of unease. Before heading to work, she stopped by an old electronics shop in Brooklyn and asked for a used laptop, just enough to load data from the USB. "This thing's slow as hell, girl," the shop owner said. Marion smiled. "As long as it doesn't spy on me, I'm good." At the Rothmore Mansion, she arrived 30 minutes early and slipped into the basement archive, a rarely used space with no cameras. Inside the locked room, she plugged in the USB. Dozens of encrypted folders appeared on the screen. Fortunately, Professor Jonas had left behind an auto-decryption file. One by one, she opened complex spreadsheets, fabricated profit-loss reports, and documents detailing money transfers through Panama, Cyprus, and Mauritius. The name Ethereum appeared in every diagram, along with flowcharts showing phantom investments worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Most shockingly, she discovered 3 bank accounts registered with forged documents, under the names of people who had died years ago. One of them had been her classmate in senior year, killed in an accident, yet now listed as the recipient of an $80 million transfer. That night, Marion returned home, shut the curtains tightly, and opened the old hard drive Jonas had given her years ago. She had never touched it since the day he disappeared. This time, she found a video file dated just before his disappearance. If you're seeing this, Marion, be careful. Rothmore isn't just a company. They're a hub for the global flow of black money, and Ethereum is just a mask. Anyone who gets close disappears. Marion froze. She thought of the vague headlines about missing journalists, the sudden suicides in the banking sector. The next day, while cleaning the office area on the third floor, she happened to find a pile of shredded papers in Arthur's trash bin. Patiently, as if solving a jigsaw puzzle, she pieced them back together. A bank account number, a recipient in Hong Kong, a handwritten note. Complete transfer before Q3. Keep SEC unaware. The pieces began to fall into place. Rothmore wasn't just an investment firm. They were running a massive money laundering operation, dodging government oversight under the guise of sustainable development. Ethereum was only the tip of the iceberg. That night, after Ellie had gone to sleep, Marion opened the money flow chart. From Ethereum, funds moved to 3 solar energy companies in India, then to a charity foundation in West Africa, and finally circled back to a private Swiss bank. All within 72 hours. Marion whispered to herself, "If I can prove this cycle, the whole system will collapse." And that very night, a black SUV parked outside her apartment building, without license plates. A shadowy figure sat inside, watching the light glowing from a ground floor window. The game had just begun. The next day, Marion returned to the Rothmore mansion with the USB drive hidden in her coat pocket. She borrowed an old computer in the storage room and carefully opened it. Inside the USB were Excel spreadsheets, scanned document images, and a financial connection map with one name standing out: Ethereum Holdings. She used public Wi-Fi to do some research. Ethereum was described as an ESG investment fund, specializing in renewable energy and clean tech. But the spreadsheets told a different story. Reinvestments were funneled through 3 shell companies in Belize, using accounts registered under the names of the deceased. Back home, she reopened the hard drive Professor Jonas had given her 9 years ago. The final file was a video Jonas had recorded just before he vanished. If you're watching this, Marion, be careful. Rothmore isn't just a company. They're a global black money hub, and Ethereum is the mask. Marion kept digging for more signs. She found shredded documents in Arthur's office, containing suspicious transaction codes. Her old financial knowledge came flooding back like a tidal wave. She remembered her university days when she was a top student, once given the chance to expose Wall Street. Then she got pregnant, then abandoned, then forgotten. But now, a second chance had arrived. She reopened the hard drive Jonas had once given her. Inside was a complex money flow diagram, tracing lines to Ethereum, Rothmore, and a web of shell companies in Panama and Hong Kong. She began to understand. She had just uncovered a global network of money laundering and financial manipulation. That night, after Ellie had fallen sound asleep, Marion locked all the windows, checked the homemade camera rigged with an old phone at the entrance, and opened her laptop in the dark. The screen's glow lit up her face, tense and alone. She reopened the USB drive and began sorting through the data. Each file felt like a dagger into a system she had once believed untouchable. A 6-minute audio recording from the hard drive revealed a conversation between Arthur Rothmore and an unknown individual. The voice had a Russian accent, discussing fake carbon credit cash flow in East Africa. They joked about a fictional government, then casually moved on to the transfer of assets to an international bank in Zurich. Marion saved the recording under the name maskbehindmask.mp3. Another folder titled Hydra Beta contained a reverse blockchain map, revealing a 3-layered laundering scheme: grant donations to renewable energy, reacquire shares via shell companies, funnel the funds back to Rothmore under the guise of tech partnerships. She made a note: follow the money trail. Each loop lasts 21 days. If I can intercept one, I can break the cycle. Just then, Marion's phone buzzed. An unknown number. A message appeared. "You're digging too deep. Your daughter deserves to live." She panicked, rushed to Ellie's room. The girl was still sound asleep. Marion hugged her tightly, tears falling onto her daughter's soft, tangled hair. She knew then, this wasn't personal anymore. This was life and death. The next day at Rothmore Mansion, Emily discreetly left a special access card in Marion's locker, registered under the name of a retired floor manager. Attached was a small note, room 607, 10 minutes, no more. Marion used the excuse of changing a light bulb on the 6th floor to slip into room 607, the server control hub for all digital contracts. Beneath the dust lay hundreds of terabytes of unencrypted data. She connected Paul's hard drive and began copying the files one by one. In the corner, an infrared camera blinked, but Emily, working from the surveillance room, rerouted the video feeds to an old backup server. With only 2% of the data left, Marion heard urgent footsteps. She hid the hard drive in a maintenance bin, unplugged the cable, and just as Arthur entered, she was wiping the wall with a damp cloth. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice like steel cooled in ice. The light was flickering. "I thought it might be a capacitor issue." Arthur paused for a moment, looked into her eyes. No evidence, but a growing suspicion, like a snake curling inside him. Marion left the abandoned train station with the USB in her pocket, feeling the pressure mounting behind her like distant thunder. The night wind whipped against her face, the scent of gasoline and metal from the tracks blending with the fermenting fear rising in her chest. Paul returned to his temporary apartment, where he had a triple encrypted computer system, secure enough to extract the remaining files. That very night, they discovered that Ethereum Holdings was preparing to merge with a private bank in Luxembourg, a jurisdiction where the law could barely touch virtualized assets. If the deal went through in the next 48 hours, all the illicit financial data would be laundered and legitimized. Marion and Paul both knew, if the truth wasn't revealed before then, all evidence would become useless. That night, Marion's apartment was broken into. The door had been breached using professional tools. No signs of forced entry, just a clean, perfect cut through the lock. When Marion returned, she found the closets ransacked, Ellie's toy box torn open, and the backup hard drive gone. On the wall, a red marker message, "Play with fire, get burned." Marion didn't hesitate. She called Emily, but the number was disconnected. Paul rechecked his entire security system and discovered that the GPS metadata on one file had been tampered with. There was a high chance they had been tracked. Out of options, Marion took Ellie to the old St. Mary's Church in Queens, where Sister Florence, the nun who once cared for her during her pregnancy, still worked. "Please watch over Ellie for a few days. If I don't come back, take her out of New York." On her way out of the church, Marion noticed a black car silently trailing her from a distance. Paul, using an anonymous routing app, guided her through 4 different streets, switched between 2 subway lines, and finally brought her to the headquarters of a small independent news outlet, Lighthouse Journal, where Yasmin, an investigative journalist of Egyptian descent, was waiting. Yasmin had exposed the Henson Group financial fraud back in 2019. She was no stranger to danger, but when she saw the data Marion had brought, she said only, "This won't just burn Rothmore, this will set Wall Street on fire." That night, Yasmin began backing up the files to an offshore secure server, preparing for a story set to go live at 6 a.m. the next morning. But Marion knew, a single article wouldn't be enough. Rothmore could deny, discredit, bury it. They needed a bigger stage. Paul suggested, "The Congressional Investigative Committee, but someone has to testify." Marion looked at him, eyes steady and resolute. "I'll do it." The next day, just as Marion left the newsroom on her way to Capitol Hill, a black SUV pulled in front of her car. 2 men in suits stepped out. But before they could approach her, a police car suddenly pulled up, one of Paul's quiet allies within internal affairs. Marion was escorted to the office of an independent congressman, Franklin Cho, known for publicly criticizing ESG investment funds as the modern face of money laundering. After reviewing the data Marion provided, he immediately called for an emergency hearing with the Financial Oversight Committee. That evening, Marion sat alone in her hotel room, staring out at the blurred city lights of Manhattan. She unlocked her phone, the wallpaper showing a photo of Ellie smiling. The last message from Sister Florence read, "She's safe," she asked. Did mommy win yet? Marion typed back, I'll answer her tomorrow morning, live on national TV. The final battle had arrived. The next morning, under the harsh glare of the congressional hearing room lights, Marion sat before a panel of lawmakers in the witness chair. The room was packed, journalists crammed into every corner. A large screen behind Marion displayed the data she was about to reveal. Television cameras from 4 of America's largest news networks were trained on her. Around her neck, she wore a small pendant, inside a photo of Ellie. Yasmin sat outside, holding Ellie's hand as they watched the live broadcast on a screen. Inside the hearing room, all eyes locked onto Marion as the gavel struck. Ms. Marion Carter, please share what you've discovered. Marion stood, her hands trembling slightly. But when she looked into the lens, a strange calm washed over her. Her voice rang out, steady and clear. I'm a janitor at Rothmore Holdings. I'm not an investigator, but I know wrongdoing when I see it. She began recounting her journey, from the hidden basement safe to Jonas's mysterious USB, from initial suspicion to her solo pursuit of the truth. She played the audio of Arthur speaking about a fake government and carbon credit manipulation. Each file displayed on the screen sent shockwaves through the silence in the room. The lawmakers sat frozen as Marion presented the global money trail linking Rothmore, Ethereum, Greenstar, and Shell charities in Africa. She clearly explained how the funds were laundered through ESG investment chains, fake contracts, and reverse-engineered financial codes. One congressman stood and asked, "How did you obtain these materials?" Marion lifted her head, eyes unwavering. "By doing the right thing, even as someone invisible." Paul sat in the back, quietly nodding. Emily, watching from afar, wiped away tears. Yasmin streamed the full hearing live with the caption, #TruthByMarion. As soon as the hearing ended, the media exploded. Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, and TikTok flooded with clips from Marion's testimony. People around the world began calling her the gatekeeper of truth. Outside, protests grew rapidly. Crowds gathered in front of Rothmore Holdings headquarters, holding signs, "She spoke for all of us. We are Marion." The U.S. government immediately ordered a freeze on all Rothmore assets. The FBI arrested Arthur Rothmore at his private residence while he attempted to board a personal jet to Uruguay. Nancy vanished from the radar, only to be arrested later in Malta, hiding in a villa equipped with an illegal data vault. The Ethereum fund was officially placed under international investigation by the US, EU, and the Swiss Anti-Money Laundering Commission. Several lawmakers who had previously received funding from Ethereum began resigning en masse. A federal investigation of unprecedented scale was launched, officially named Operation White Veil. But Marion knew victory wasn't just about arrests. She still saw thousands of women like herself, invisible, pushed to the margins, yet with sharp eyes and upright hearts. In her final interview of the day, she said, "If you think you don't have a voice, look at me. I'm living proof that someone who sweeps floors can shake the walls of power. But I'm not special. I just stopped being afraid." In the wake of #TruthByMarion, America and the world reeled. Over the following weeks, Marion Carter's name dominated the headlines from CNN and BBC to Al Jazeera. But she declined every interview and media appearance. She didn't want to be a symbol. She just wanted to be a mother. Instead, she quietly used a modest fund from Emily's restructured trust to open the Jonas Center, a small building in Brooklyn, offering basic accounting, financial safety, and fraud awareness training to immigrant women and single mothers. The first class had 8 women. By year's end, over 300 had enrolled. Paul often visited to teach digital security. He and Marion, without saying it, were clearly drawn to each other, healing slowly, quietly, like a world recovering after a storm. In a university seminar, Marion stood before 40 law students. One asked, "What was the hardest part of it all?" She didn't hesitate. "Not letting fear turn me to stone, staying human, even when the whole system told me to stay silent." Ellie, now 10, began a blog about her mother called Barefoot and True. She recounted every detail in a child's words, but that innocence moved millions. One night, Ellie asked, "Were you scared, Mom?" "I was," Marion smiled, brushing Ellie's hair. "But I was more scared of what would happen if I did nothing." Time passed. Emily became the new head of Greenstar. She implemented a triple-layer fund model: investment, transparency, and impact, requiring triple auditing. Emily and Marion kept in touch through handwritten letters each month. In one, Emily wrote, "We aren't heroes, Marion, but because of you, I learned not to be complicit." The historic Operation White Veil investigation not only toppled Rothmore Holdings, but also triggered a cascading collapse of 20 satellite financial organizations across Europe, Africa, and Asia. Governments demanded ESG money trails be made public. A Canadian MP said Marion Carter's impact eclipsed the Panama Papers. At the United Nations, a resolution named the Marion Convention on Global Fair Finance passed, establishing a framework for carbon credit transparency, green money laundering prevention, and third-party ESG auditing. From Rio to Tokyo, social justice groups adopted the Jonas Center model, under different names, but with one mission: empower the financially overlooked. Yasmin received the Pulitzer for investigative excellence. She donated the entire prize to a migrant women's education program in North Africa. At the award ceremony, she said, "If I was the echo, Marion was the thunder." Emily Rothmore rebuilt Green Star from the ground up. She released quarterly transparency reports, partnered with environmental watchdogs, and named Marion an honorary advisor. She also launched the Ellie Carter Scholarship for girls pursuing ethical finance. Paul, his reputation restored, was appointed as a special supervisor to the UN International Audit Council. He declined offers from major firms and chose to audit for nonprofits in Zimbabwe, Nepal, and Venezuela, where transparency was rare. Around the world, from tiny classrooms in Kenya to lecture halls in Berlin, Marion Carter's name was invoked as proof. Justice doesn't belong to the powerful. It sometimes begins with a single mother, mopping floors at midnight, holding truth in one hand and hope in the other. 10 years later, Ellie, now a university economics student, stood on the stage of the Global Finance Forum. Wearing a light gray suit, she said, "My mother wasn't a politician. She wasn't a journalist. She wasn't a billionaire. But my mother saved the world without money, and she did it with a mop and the truth." The entire hall stood in applause. In the front row, Marion sat silently. A single tear quietly fell.